Welcome back to Echo Ridge. Today, we have a lot of little small projects that are going to sort of lead up to the colony's what we're going to call Industrial Revolution. And it, of course, centered around our well-lit bonbon farm now that we're going to be producing all sorts of nectar and some ethanol. Right now, we only have 4 critters in this stable and 2 critters in this stable. And despite those small numbers, we already have ethanol backing up into this tank, which means we're going to be able to run the petroleum generators. Except, well, this system is not great and we have all sorts of nonsense everywhere, which is one of the reasons why I'm cleaning all this up. And then I can filter out the polluted water from the brine. And for now, I guess I can just throw the polluted water into this giant tank, but that's only going to last so long as well. I suppose I could feed all that polluted water to the trees and start harvesting all of their branches, but I really don't need the wood because we're getting wood from the phloxes. And while I don't necessarily need the ethanol right now because all of our steam turbines from our geothermal plants are taking care of all of our power requirements, it will be necessary because eventually I'm going to have to turn off those steam turbines. Well, not necessarily the turbines themselves, but rather I'm going to need to disconnect these geovents, which this power will still last a long time in here. We just won't be putting any more steam in there. And the reason why we're going to be doing that is because I'm going to have to feed the geothermal pump something else to be able to pop this solidified mammoth patty right out of this geovent. So it's a whole big mess. But I think we're going to start with increasing our squash fries. You can see we don't have any more plum squashes, which means our dupes are stuck eating pike apple skewers and omelets. The omelets are going to be going away because we're just going to start letting them grow old instead of turning their eggs into omelets. We'll get to that today too. But I think this area here will be great for some plum squashes. We already have a cooling loop here, so we don't have to worry about that. The room sizes are 96 to start off with. 96 being important because we are going to start turning all of these growing areas into greenhouses so we can use some farm stations. So I think I'll start by letting the dupes take care of all this nonsense, get rid of all of it, and start to clean up that area a little bit. We also don't need this anymore, or this. And as a matter of fact, we should probably start planning our fertilizer synthesizer setup. We have dirt coming from all of the phloxes, and we have phosphorite coming from the mammoth patties. So far, about 2.5 tons. The only other ingredient that the fertilizer synthesizer requires is polluted water. And we've been looking to do something with it anyways. Problem is, it's pretty cold. So maybe the fertilizer synthesizer needs to go in here somewhere? That way I don't have very far to pump this polluted water. In fact, why don't we calm this cooling loop down? That somehow just got reset to 25, even though I had looked at it just a minute ago and it was not that. Let's say minus 20 on both of these. I'm also gonna clean this area up. Gonna need some pumps in here. And I suppose this area is as good as any for our setup, so I'm gonna start cleaning all this up as well. We are gonna have to insulate the area because the fertilizer synthesizer setup does eventually get warm, and we don't want to be wasting our cooling. It is an enclosed system, so once we seal it in, we won't have to worry about it. The more difficult part is going to be getting the polluted water in here and making sure it doesn't freeze in its pipes. We will make everything in here out of steel, although I'm not 100% sure that is necessary. You could probably get away with some gold amalgam. There's our liquid intake, so we're going to use some insulated pipes. What do we have here? Igneous rock will work just fine. Come straight down in here, and we'll see how that works. We may have to make some modifications just in case. Looks like we have plenty of room on this leg of power because these don't run very often, and polluted water is finished. Now we are going to want to vacuum this place out, which actually I can push this over one more because the fertilizer synthesizer does emit natural gas, and while we don't have a use for the natural gas yet, we will eventually for our oven. So temporarily we will hook it up to this high pressure gas vent so we can get all the oxygen out of there. How are my power lines in this area? 1440? That might be pushing it with everything else on this line. But we do have the entire spine sitting right here, so why don't I just put in another power transformer? Granted, I do like all the power transformers in the same area. It looks nice and neat, but it's just really not necessary. And now even the conductive wire run won't have to be as far. which doesn't really matter because we do have an infinitely sustainable source of the copper and eventually aluminum, but this looks okay. Now, outside of the synthesizer room, we are going to have a couple of conveyor loaders made out of copper. And these are going to be what's bringing in our phosphorite and our dirt. Now, it is possible in the future that we could directly connect those rails to the sources, for instance, the phosphorite here or the dirt from these ranches, but that requires a lot more ore, and ore is at a premium here. While I'm working on that, you can see some wood tiles going in, and we're doing this just to sort of beautify the base. The decor is decent, but it could be a lot better. The decor rating on a single wood tile is plus 15 at a radius of 3. So when you start peppering wood everywhere, it really does help out. Now, is this going to make a giant mess and are we going to have critters running around everywhere? Yes, absolutely. But the juice will be worth the squeeze in the end. Oh yeah, this is going to be a dumpster fire for sure. Also, a bit of bad news. We had to get rid of the sweepy. I know, I'm just as upset about it as you are. But the reason why is, yes, it was amazing that Sweepy could walk through the doors and go pick up this little bits of ethanol. Well, the seals could walk through the doors too. So the ranching was getting all sorts of bork. I also have updated the seal egg system to use a timer sensor, so we're going to get a lot more eggs. And we're also going to be automating this system a little bit. Now, because I don't have room to be putting auto sweepers and the like in here, we're going to be doing manual egg drops. Which means anytime there's an egg in here, the duplicants are going to bring it over to this automatic dispenser and drop it right down here. Well, we're not going to let them inside of here, so they will not be able to go pick them back up, which works for us. But we're also going to have an auto sweeper in here, and that way the auto sweeper can automatically load the incubator here. So at least that part is automated. Now there is still one more thing. Remember, we want all that tallow from out here, and if tallow is sitting here, the duplicants are not going to be able to reach. So we are going to provide a conveyor loader, and all of that tallow is going to be dropped right here. Back up to our synthesizer. I think I have everything in here, although I might be forgetting something. Suppose I can hook this power up over here, and all that'll really be left is to seal it up, let it vacuum itself out. That's one thing I'm missing is the automation. Now we're going to be using some automation here to control the flow of dirt. We don't need to drop off all the dirt inside the colony in here, so we're going to have it set to where if there's any dirt sitting on this weight plate, in other words, the fertilizer synthesizer doesn't need anymore, it will turn off this conveyor chute, which will cause the dirt to back up in this conveyor loader and the phosphorite to back up into this one, meaning the dupes will not bring any more around. We also are going to use some automation here in this smart looking storage bin. Actually, the bin's not going to be able to be here. I need the bin on the outside so the duplicants can get to it. In fact, let's move all this stuff up here because this is getting to be a little convoluted on this side. And the dupes already plugged some stuff in that they shouldn't have plugged in because, well, I wasn't paying attention. And so this line is not quite filtered yet. We're going to get there. But now we're going to have the drop off and delivery of all the goodies right up here. So we're going to say any phosphorite sitting around the colony can come up here. We'll let them fill up what they can at a priority of 5, and then I'll reduce it to a priority of 4. And then this one's going to say dirt. This storage bin is going to hold fertilizer, and then we're going to need another conveyor loader to drop. We'll put it, say, here. And all the fertilizer being created will be picked up by this auto sweeper, put in here. And just to make the run a little shorter, we'll put this conveyor chute here instead. And then one conveyor rail will connect them. So anytime any fertilizer is created, it's going to be dropped in this conveyor loader, dropped through this chute. The auto sweeper will pick it up and then put it in this smart storage bin. When we have, let's say, 2 tons of fertilizer in the storage bin, we can then turn off the fertilizer synthesizer. We're going to do that using the standard method of bin, not gate, to the building. And as soon as we get everything vacuumed out, I'll be able to turn this whole thing on. Ooh, almost. I forgot the Atmos sensor for the gas pump. I always like to have one in there. It's always something. So I'll just throw that there, and whammo blammo, and that should be done in a minute. Now I need to figure this situation out. We are going to be filtering out this water. That way we can send the brine back to the brine tank, and what little water is in here somewhere else, which means we're probably going to need a 2-stage filter just until we get all of this cleaned. And while, yes, this polluted water will last a very long time, the petroleum generators are going to produce a lot more polluted water than the fertilizer synthesizer is going to be able to use. So eventually, putting on a back burner, we're going to have to find some additional use for this polluted water. Liquid filter, say here. And I think for ease of use, if it is not polluted water, that way I don't have to worry about overfilling any sort of tanks, we're just going to throw everything in here. It'll create a big old mess because some of this is going to freeze, but it'll be fine. And then if it is polluted water, it's going to come up here and go inside the fertilizer synthesizer. The wood construction's going great, except we have floxes inside the mammoth rooms, and we're actually missing some mammoths in here. Let's move these little guys up, move this mammoth back in here. We should probably just do a whole sweep of this entire place, but we'll get to that as well. And it's also time to start setting up some additional plum squashes. I'm going to have to manually get rid of all these farm tiles, because for some odd reason, you can't overwrite them with hydroponic farm tiles like any other tile. And then we can just start sweeping everything. Yes! Why didn't I build a door here? With all the wood tiles in, the decor looks absolutely a lot better, even though we still have a lot of sweeping to do. I'll do another decor shot once we finish all the sweeping, but I think it's about time to put in the squash plants themselves. Ooh, there's another egg. You need to go live in your new home up here. Which reminds me, I did end up having to put doors on our well-lit bonbon farm. That way the shine bugs don't get out. So the first thing we need to look at when we are planting our plum squash plants is how many we can actually support. Well, that all depends on these spigot seals. A spigot seal who's being properly fed will produce 40 kilos worth of ethanol per cycle. Well, we're shooting for 14 spigot seals. I'm going to see if these trees can produce enough to feed 8, but we'll cross that bridge later, which would give me a total of 560 kilos per cycle. Well, each plum squash plant requires only 15 kilos per cycle, which means I have enough ethanol to support 37 plum squash plants. Well, here's 22, and then this would be 15 here, for our total of 37. If I do end up putting those extra 2 spigot seals in, well, then we'd be able to support another 5 plum squash plants, and that would bring us to about here. So I think what I'm going to do, just to be more conscientious of the ethanol, is just replace the back 2 on each stable, and that way they still look all nice and the samey. That'll give me a total of 40 plants, which is still a little less than the amount of ethanol we're producing, which works out for me because then we'll have some ethanol left over to feed the petroleum generators. So I think now's the time that we're going to be able to put in a bunch of these farm stations. We're going to be fertilizing the plum squashes for sure. We are also going to be fertilizing every single one of these aloe veras. Oh, that's going to be gorgeous. We're about to have oxalate coming out of our ears. I will cut back a little bit on the aloe vera plants, but the primary reason we're going to be using the farm station is to just conserve ice, because if we're producing twice as much oxalate for the same cost, well, we don't need as many plants, which means we'll use less ice. And I think that's it. We're not growing anything else, right? And since I'm going to be growing the plum squashes up here, put those in there like that. I'll leave the 5 off at the end, just until I get those seals in there. I'm not going to be growing them in here. I am still happy with the 2 mammoths in the ranch. We might be able to increase it to 3. But even after putting in all that carbon and forgetting to reconnect the shearing station for the mammoths, we're already back up to 29 units. So I think 2 is fine for now. Now all I have to do is get the rest of the ethanol in here, which this is going to be easy. We are going to prioritize with a bridge the ethanol to come all the way through here and then all the way through here. And then it'll only be the overflow from this bridge that'll end up heading towards the petroleum generators. With those farm stations in and this place vacuumed out, I can now disconnect this pipe here. We'll probably let this place get overpressured with natural gas for a little while because I don't have any use for it quite yet. And while it is awesome that they did bring new recipes with the deep fryer, I don't think there's any new recipes with the gas range. In fact, the gas range doesn't look like it uses any crops from the new DLC, which is everything we're growing, so no need for the gas range yet. So now all that's left is to turn this thing on. We'll plug in the polluted water, And we will allow this to flow. We're going to have to put these on 4s, this on a 4, so that way the conveyor loader does get the priority. And as we said, the phosphorite's going to keep coming down. It gets dropped. And now all I have to do is set the weight plates. So I'm going to say if it is below 10 kilos, keep it open. And then the same for the dirt. And as soon as a little bit of dirt comes down here, stops the rails and everything gets backed up. And we already have some natural gas in here. We'll be able to control the gas pump with the Atmos sensor if we ever need to in the future, but this system is done, and at all times we're going to keep 5 tons worth of fertilizer on hand. Now this is going to increase our farming tasks quite a bit, because the farmer touch buff has to be applied to every single plant. Now granted, we're going to be getting twice as much back for it, but that's still a significant farming cost. Not too big of a deal because, well, we have 5 farmers. Another little system I wanted to set up was to automate getting the food out of the kitchen. And this is probably going to be the simplest kitchen we've ever stuck with in any of our series. But the reason's pretty simple. Everywhere here is a deep freezer, so we don't have to worry about building a deep freezer in and around this area. We're just going to drop all the food right here. I am going to add some radiant liquid pipes to make sure this area stays nice and chill. I prefer around -20, and while it is there right now, I don't want any of the hot materials to start heating this place up. Oh, we forgot some wood tiles. In our bathroom systems, that yes, we're still using the outhouses, because I haven't thought of a way that I want to set up bathrooms and keeping water from freezing. So we're just going to manually take all of this polluted dirt and drop it right here, which is going to give us enough room to add another compost when we got rid of these storage bins. Not that this is saving too much duplicate labor, but I guess every little bit helps, right? We also have a pair of deodorizers that can capture all the polluted oxygen, so we don't have to worry about it as well. I'm still waiting on my ethanol supply to sort of kick in. We're at 4 critters here and 5 over here for a total of 9. Slow but steady. I'm going to fast forward a little bit and start prepping on our next project because it's going to be the doozy. And the reason why we need these petroleum generators on the ready. And that is this glorious thing here. I decided not to do the 10 steam turbine, 1 chamber thing. I wanted to keep them separate so I could have a little bit more finite control. And that way we'll be able to play with all 3 of them. What I think is eventually going to happen is I'm going to connect all 3 of these. And that way I don't have to have 3 separate automation systems. And when the geothermal heat pump goes off, I don't have to worry about the pressure of one dropping before the pressure of the other. But for now, I need this one separate because it is time to unblock this vent. And what's going to happen is I'm going to let the geothermal heat pump empty itself one more time. And once it does, I'm not going to add in any more other liquids because the only liquid I'm going to be adding is liquid that's going to be hot enough to melt lead. Now this colony doesn't really have any liquids other than mercury that can get hot enough to be able to do that. Lead melts at 327 degrees. Well, mercury can go up to the 356. The problem is mercury's specific heat capacity is absolutely garbage, so you lose a lot of heat just by transferring it over. So what liquid did I come up with on here? Well, I've been hinting towards it for a couple of episodes. We've created a lot of plastic, 20 tons in fact, although we only need 12. The rest of the plastic is going to be used to make all of our ladders a little bit better, because as a reminder, plastic ladders have a run speed of 20%, whereas normal ladders do not. By the way, now that we're nicely swept, the decor even looks better. Isn't that nice? And the reason why we're going to be melting plastic is because what happens when we do, we'll get liquid naphtha. Liquid naphtha can go all the way up to 538 degrees, and it has a specific heat capacity of 2.1. Much better. So, it's time to melt some plastic. I've moved some little brine bottles here just because it's what we had laying around, and I'm just going to empty them right here and create us a couple of soft locks, and that way I can work in a vacuum. I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to need to, but just in case. These things can get a little squirrely. I'm going to be very careful when I come up on this little tile because it has oxygen in it. And we're going to be making our way all the way over to this obsidian that is very, very hot. And I'm going to use this heat coming off this volcano to melt all these temperature shift plates until I have 12 tons worth of naphtha. And I'll know when we do because I will have 2.5 liquid reservoirs filled. Now all this abyssite's pretty hot too, but it's not really going to help us because it won't transfer into a temperature shift plate. But this obsidian absolutely will. And I think what we'll do is make a little pit for the naphtha to fall into, and then all I need to do is find my plastic and put a temperature shift plate in. Now, this first experiment is going to see how hot the naphtha is once it melts. It should be 159 degrees, which isn't quite hot enough, unfortunately. But I have another plan for that as well. But step one is actually getting the naphtha. Then we'll reheat it a little bit to where it's at least 200, 225 degrees, and that way when the geothermal heat pump gets a hold of it, it'll end up around 350 degrees. At least that's the plan. And there it is, voila, 160 degree naphtha. And here we go. We got some very hot metal tiles here, and I'm going to extend this into this tile here. Well, I'm actually going to wait until all this naphtha is pumped away. It's sitting at around 212 degrees. It can go a little higher, but I guess we'll try it now. I just don't want the naphtha to get too hot, but there's only 100 kilos worth of heat in these tiles. Plus this steel tile is going to equalize the temperature a little bit. And then once we're confident that the naphtha is hot enough, I will activate this switch and throw it in these liquid reservoirs. And then when we're ready, we'll dump all of this hot naphtha directly into the geothermal pump. Not before disconnecting this geovent and this geovent. So we're only going to get the naphtha here. Don't worry about the broken conveyor loader. I was vacuuming this place out and the conveyor loader apparently was still running. Easy fix. Oh, that could have been an issue too. We were making it out of copper. Oops. It's always something. Oh, this is perfect. These metal tiles are down to about 300 degrees and the naphtha is up to 226. All of the heat is coming out of the tiles. Naphtha's at 231. I'd like it at 250. So I'm going to be very gentle with this here because what's going to happen is this door is going to shut and transfer some thermals pretty quickly. Well, it takes a little while for the temperature to go from these tiles all the way over here. So even if we want it at 250, you don't want to set it at 250. Door shuts, heats transfer, and then the door opens as soon as this thermosensor registers that, nope, the naphtha is getting too hot. And look at that, we're at 251, still transferring some, but this is fine. I'm going to go ahead and pump this. And now that the pump is too hot inside of a vacuum, it's overheating a little bit, but it's okay because it's time for our next batch of plastic. We'll put it right up here again. Make sure we turn the signal switch off so we don't immediately start pumping. Door shuts pretty quickly. No big deal. Naphtha's rising in temp. Oh, this is beautiful. I'm just going to go ahead and queue up a couple of these. Give me some more. This is great because now the naphtha's sitting at 237. This will be the third temperature shift plate for this batch, which will be 2.4 tons worth of naphtha. And we're going to start pumping it until it gets a little lower. I don't want it to be too low because then the pump will start overheating again and I'll just keep melting some more. Let's see if we can't streamline this, huh? And there we have it. We have 10 plus 3,200 kilos, so a little over 13 tons, which is plenty to fill up the geothermal heat pump. And once again, I missed it. It's at 15%. Let me get it up to the 99%, make sure it exhausts everything, and then I'm going to disconnect these here. I also don't want any funny business, so do not inject more brine in here. I wish this little guy had some automation that you could tie into. You could really get a little bit fancier if it had a port that said ready or it requires more coolant. That would be handy. We're at 99%, so as soon as it says it's full, I'm going to turn it off. All right, that's 100% pressure, so I should be able to disconnect from there. It has its 12 tons. Go ahead and do your thing. Both geovents are ready. Why haven't you done your bounce up and down thing? All right, I've waited for a little while, so I'm thinking it needs just a smidge more. There it goes. The 100% is not actually 100%. It's like 99.9. It probably rounded. But now we have 0% pressure. Okay, so we have 0.08. That's okay. And then once these geovents empty everything they have to vent, I will come in here and disconnect this one. Thank you, Luke. Now we're disconnected. And then I'm going to do the same over here, except this one doesn't have a liquid lock anymore, so I'm actually going to have to break in. This place is not going to be really happy about, but it'll split 50 kilos worth of steam pressure. It'll be fine. This one, we did build a liquid lock in it and had not removed it yet because, well, you never know what's going to go wrong in here. And this will be sort of handy. I think what I'll do, just to keep them separated, the heat doesn't matter so much, but I'll put a manual airlock there. Now I can come in here. We got 50 kilos, so I can go ahead and disconnect this guy. By the time the Duke gets here, it should be empty. Should. And now this one is disconnected as well. So the only active vent is this one, and it is blocked. And this geothermal heat pump is waiting for some juicy, juicy liquid. And all I'm going to do is give it some. Yes. Flow hot naphtha. Now right now it says the liquid temperature inside the geothermal heat pump is 94 degrees. We need it to be at least 200. Oh, this is perfect. 1% pressure. We're at 230 degrees. Now I'm going to want to see what happens when this thing blows its top. So I'm going to get to like 99% and then head on over there. We are at 100% pressure, but we're getting a no geovent connected, which isn't fair because this one is connected. It's blocked. So I'm going to have to spill some naphtha into one of these vents, so I might as well do it in this one since they're sort of connected and we're already going to have some naphtha in this one. So let me reconnect this one. Thank you, little alien. And there we have it, completed geothermal power plant. Now I'm sure there's going to be a little movie or something, and I'm also going to read everything below this. So before I continue, spoiler warning, if you're waiting to unlock this achievement and don't want to spoil it for yourself, why don't you skip ahead about 1 minute? My duplicants have successfully cleared the obstructed geovent. We can now maximize the full potential of this formidable heat and power source, and perhaps experiment with input temperatures to produce more interesting secondary byproducts. For instance, if we had oil, we could turn one of these things into a petroleum boiler. My duplicants seem keen to commemorate this accomplishment by keeping the obstruction as something of a trophy. I'm sure they're going to be throwing a party. And now I am once again 100% on achievements for Oxygen Not Included. Do we get a movie? Oh, glorious. And there is our solidified Mammoth patty. I swear these dupes will do anything to throw a party. Though the journey has been long and marked by challenges that often seem insurmountable, we have prevailed in harnessing this planet's core potential. We now stand proudly at the precipice of a sustainably powered future. It is deeply humbling. I am hopeful that we've learned enough to wield this machinery more wisely than those who came before us. Well, I suppose I can reconnect everything as normal. We're going to be spitting out naphtha for a little while, but that's okay. And during that whole time, we still had plenty of heat. We only dropped to around 172 degrees, so we're still providing power for the rest of the colony with our first geovent. Last update I have for you is, well, the ethanol production wasn't quite what I was hoping for. So I improvised and just, well, doubled the amount of spigot seals. I turned this entire second row into spigot seal ranches. So now all I have to do is make sure that none of these trees are actually dumping off their nectar, and that way the seals can get every last drop. In the bottom ones, I reduced the critters back down to 5. Even with the increased amount of light, we weren't able to run more seals than we were up here with this sort of duct tape solution. So our math was off. Instead of having 14 seals, I really only had 10 well-fed seals. But now that I have the rest of those squashes running, I can remove these from the line. In fact, I'll just disconnect them from here. And then we'll end up feeding the mammoth just using a critter feeder. It doesn't make sense to keep these going because, well, they have no farm station. I'll let the existing plum squashes consume the rest of the ethanol in here, and then we'll dig them up too. So now 100% of our ethanol will be heading up to this farm here, and we should see all the plum squashes getting the ethanol that it needs. And considering they're on a farm station, we're going to be creating twice as many, which is more squash fries for us. I still have some other systems I want to put into play. For instance, when the spigot seals inside the ranches perish, their tallow is still sitting here. So I may set up a system where all the tallow is dropped off in here, and just a small amount of it is kept full inside the kitchen. maybe using one of these nice little storage tiles, but that's going to require data analysis research. So, another thing for next time. Lastly, just another tip. You do need to manually reconnect this last geovent after you've unblocked it. Oh, look at all this naphtha. It's alright, I'll play your game. All said and done, the duplicants are loving their squash fries and their new shiny coprolite. Yeah, it's a perfect decoration for the Great Hall. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and are looking forward to more adventures on this colony. If you remember at the beginning of this series, I said our primary objective was just earning that achievement and unblocking that vent. Now that we've done that, what should we do next? I look forward to hearing what you have to say about it in the comments below. So until next time, much love, happy gaming, and I'll talk to you soon.